Right now, you have a choice to make. You're either building a personal brand to get followers, or you're building it to get customers. Gurus would tell you that you need to make the widest content possible to get the most amount of views. But the reality is, all you need to do is build real trust with your ideal customer. In 2025, after 16 years of building personal brands, I decided to do something crazy and build my own. And in the first 10 months, we got over 200,000 followers, 40,000 people on our email list, but most importantly, we received over 750 applications to work with us. In this course, I'm gonna help you start your personal brand by establishing your brand positioning and building a content strategy that gets real customers, not just followers. But here's the crazy thing. There's a chance that you are here watching this video thinking that you should start your personal brand purely because you've seen somebody you admire do it, and so you think this is just something that you have to do. A huge mistake that I see is people are building their personal brand just to check a box. They have never actually sat down and defined a goal or what their desired outcome is, and then use that to inform whether or not they should actually build their personal brand. I actually believe that there might be a case where you don't need to do that. When I was embarking on this crazy journey of building my own business and potentially building my own personal brand, I had the fortune of being able to sit down with Gary Vaynerchuk. I worked for Gary for a couple of years. When I shared with him that I was considering not only building my own consulting firm, but starting to put out content to help people build their personal brand, but then also drive awareness and conversion to my business. And his response shocked me. This is the man that preaches online 24/7. Everyone needs to be making content. Content is the gateway drug to what you want out of life. That's like his direct quote. But what he said to me is, I really think you should be sure that this is what you really want. You might be able to build a great business without ever making content. I want you to make sure that this fits into the life that you are building. And as you can imagine, sitting down with the content king, hearing something like that, it caused me to think twice. And I really tried to look at what am I trying to accomplish? Is making content publicly, is this necessary to accomplish that? And what I realized is that I had two main goals. The first one was that I wanted to grow my business. Theoretically, I could do that without making content. But the second goal was that I wanted to help people build a personal brand. I think there's a shitload of people teaching people how to build a bad personal brand that makes the world worse. I want to help people build personal brands that add to the world, that make the world better. I wanted to do that for a huge amount of people that I know will never work with us directly at Ralston. They'll never pay us a dime. And so the first desired outcome I had, I could accomplish that without making content. The second one, where I help a bunch of people for free that never work with us, I would never have been able to do that, at least at the scale that I'm looking to accomplish, without making content. And so it answered the question for me. The beauty of it is now I have something to measure against. Every decision I make supports those two desired outcomes. Is this helping build the business, or is this helping educate people for free? If it's not doing one of those two things, I'm probably not gonna put it out in the content. You really need to think about what it is that you are trying to accomplish and whether or not content supports that. So all that to say, it was absolutely insane to me that Gary said this and kind of gave me a pause. But it really made me realize just how important it is to establish and understand the end goal in mind, because you may realize that there are better ways of accomplishing that goal outside of making content. Here's an example. I have a friend who is in executive protection, okay? And let's say that this friend of mine is currently a security guard at a local mall or a local bank. We'll use the mall example. And they have the desire to work their way up into executive protection, where they are protecting and being like basically a bodyguard for somebody who is probably pretty important. If you're gonna be Taylor Swift's EP, it's probably not a good thing if a bunch of people know who you are, because you're not going to be able to move through different scenarios as discreetly. In that case, do you think that it would be a good idea to make content? Do you think that making content and building your personal brand publicly will help you accomplish your desired outcome? I'm gonna go ahead and answer it for you. I'm gonna say the answer is no. There are scenarios where being more publicly known actually hurts your desired outcome and makes it harder to accomplish the goal at hand rather than easier. And so what we need to do is we need to establish, what is that desired outcome? What are we trying to accomplish? And does building a public personal brand and making content support that? Or does it hurt it? But before we get into establishing your brand positioning, I want to figure out what this goal is, this desired outcome that you have, what you're trying to achieve. A couple years ago, I came up with a framework called the Brand Journey Framework. And it's 4 simple questions, and it basically helps you figure out what that desired outcome is, and then everything you need to do from today to get to that point. It reverse engineers all the way from the desired outcome to today. Very, very simple, very effective. But actually, before we get into the questions, we have a workbook that goes with this entire course. And it allows you to take what you are hearing me say and supposedly learning and actually make sure that you learn it and apply it to your personal brand. You're gonna click that link, go to the website, enter your email. We will send you the workbook for you to download and go through in accordance with this entire course. And the Brand Journey Framework is the first exercise you're going to do. Here's the 4 simple questions. Question number 1 is, what is your desired outcome? What are you wanting to achieve? The second question you'll answer is, in order to achieve that desired outcome, what would I need to be known for, right? Like, what is the reputation that I need to have? The third question is, in order to develop that reputation, to be known for the thing, to get the outcome I desire, what would you have to do? We become known for things not just by saying bullshit out of our mouth, but by the actions that we actually take day in and day out. What are the actions you need to do to be known for the thing to get your desired outcome? The last and final question, the 4th one, what do I need to learn in order to do the things to become known for the thing to get my desired outcome? If you go through this journey, you're going to have a very clear roadmap on how you're going to get to your desired outcome. But then you can look at, what is that end goal in mind? And does making content accelerate my ability to get there? Or does it actually make it slower and harder for me to accomplish that goal? If the answer is it makes it easier, amazing. Let's proceed. If the answer is it doesn't make it easier and it's actually going to be harder, I would encourage you, don't waste any more time on this video. The rest of this video is for those of you who have identified that making content and building a public personal brand moves you closer to your end goal. If that's the case, let's get you closer to the end goal. And the first question that I would like to address is, why should anybody listen to you? You watching this, you're in one of 2 camps. You're either the student or the expert. And the majority of this video, to be very clear, is for the expert. But one thing that I want to call out is that some of you are actually a student who are pretending to be an expert. If you're the student, you don't have the big W's. You don't have years of experience. You're not who your audience wants to be. You're on the journey of becoming who your audience wants to become. What your job is to be the guinea pig, to be the proxy for your audience. You do all the testing and investing that either goes well or doesn't go well. And so if you're the student, fucking be the student. Don't pretend and posture as the expert. This is where I see so many people get trapped and stuck online. And what you end up doing is you burn trust forever with that audience. So for the students watching, know that you are the student. Now, the expert, I think it's probably pretty clear to you, although you might be somebody who would feel awkward calling yourself an expert. But if you have multiple W's on your resume, if you are the person who your audience wants to become, or you have done the thing that your audience wants to do, then you are the expert. And it's your job to teach in public. The student is learning in public, but you are teaching in public. And there's a little bit of build in public that you can add into that. But the main thing that I want to focus on is that you're going to be sharing how you've accomplished what you've accomplished. The mistakes, I guess, that you've made along the way that you would encourage others to avoid when going on the same journey. But you also want to make sure that you're imparting to them the ability to go from where they are to that expert level quicker than you did. And the first thing I want to do is actually an exercise. I want to start this video off by actually taking some real action and getting some results right away for us, okay? And so what you're gonna do is there's a link in the description below this video on YouTube. Click that link, enter your email. We're going to send you the workbook. And in that workbook, there's one exercise that I really want to start off with, which is building your bank. Now, for the students watching this, and again, like I said, we're not going to talk too much to the students, but I do want to give you this because I think it's really useful. You're going to build what I call an interest bank. Interest as in what you are interested in. This is a running list of the things that you are studying, you're experiencing, you're experimenting with, you're learning, you're testing. These are all the things that you are on your journey of learning, and your channel is going to be documenting the process of improving or becoming better or working towards becoming the expert in this field. Now, for the experts watching, you need to establish a credibility bank. This is a running list of the things that you've done, you've achieved, you've solved, you've proven, the mistakes that you've made and the lessons that you learned from that. These are the things that you built. These are the successes that you have in your career. And what this does is it builds the foundation that you're going to build and amplify your personal brand off of. Now, a really important note here. For some of you, you might feel like, oh, that's not fair. It's just the way that life is. The reality is the results that you're going to get for your personal brand do have a lot to do with what you put down in your credibility bank. Now, real quick, I don't want you to misunderstand this. I'm not saying make shit up in your credibility bank, but the more impressive the items in your credibility bank are, the more likely you are to have better than average results with growing your personal brand in the first couple of years. It's no secret to me that one of the reasons why we're having the success we're having with building my personal brand in the first year, I mean, hello, we're at over 200,000 followers, over 39,000, maybe even 40,000 people on our email list at this point. Like, it's getting kind of crazy. And I believe that we're being intentional with how we're making our content, but it's not lost on me that I have had several big public W's in my career that have added to the legitimacy and credibility that I bring into the content I'm sharing. For example, rather than listening and watching content on how to build your personal brand from somebody who has only done it for themselves, a lot of people value the fact that I have helped build multiple very big personal brands within the business creator space. And so they know that I'm not just speaking from a tactic point of view, but I'm teaching principles that work in differing scenarios. And so what I want you to do is put together your credibility bank that's in the workbook. You can go in, fill that out for yourself. And what you're going to do is this is the foundation that you draw from and you speak to, because the question that we're trying to answer is, why would anybody listen to you? Well, the answer is in your credibility bank. This is why people will listen to what you have to say. Because if you do more epic shit, you're gonna have more epic shit to talk about. It's a crazy concept. If you aren't impressed with your credibility bank, well, that's fine. You can keep rolling and start building your personal brand, but just know that you should work on building a more impressive credibility bank, which means go do cool shit. For example, if I'm wanting to learn from you on how to climb a mountain, well, if you've only climbed, 5,000, 6,000 feet peaks, that's not that impressive to me. But if you've bagged a bunch of 14ers, you've done Everest, you've done K2 and all of these other crazy summits, well, then I'm suddenly going to take what you have to say from a different frame than maybe, Joe, who has only climbed a couple local hills, as we would call them in the Northwest, not mountains, okay? And so the more impressive your credibility, the more buy-in and belief your audience will have with you, and belief that what you're saying is gonna lead them to the outcomes they desire. Now that we are on the path of establishing why people are gonna actually listen to what we have to say, one thing that I wanna stop and do real quick is address burnout. But I wanna hit this from a brand perspective, because I think there's ways that you can burn out from a content creation perspective, but also from actually how you're building your brand and determining your brand positioning. And I believe this happens, burnout, because most creators end up building a brand that they fucking hate. You start talking about shit that you're not actually interested in or passionate about, and definitely not an expert in, but you just see these trending topics that all these other personal brands have built their brand around, and so you assume that you need to do the same. But the reality is if you don't like the brand that you are building, do you really think that you're going to stick with it for long enough to get the results that you desire? No. And so instead of trying to build a brand that the algorithm tells you, build the brand that excites you. This year, there's been a lot of things that we have chosen to not do from a actual content perspective, from a brand pillar perspective, from a packaging on our content perspective, that we know would actually lead to more views, more subscribers, more followers. We'd get better numbers, but it'd be building a brand that I was embarrassed of, that I wasn't proud of. I can't tell you the amount of times that I have met with different individuals who they make YouTube content as an example, and they're consistently putting out YouTube videos. But here's an interesting little element. They won't text those YouTube videos to any of their friends. They won't share it with anybody whose opinion they actually care about. Why? Because they are embarrassed of the brand that they are building. And to me, that is just a countdown clock to quitting. If you quit, you don't get your desired outcome. And so I really want to just take this moment really quick here for you to be very intentional with how you're crafting this. As we move through the rest of this video and the rest of the exercises that you're going to go through in your workbook, I want you to be very thoughtful. Don't think through the lens of what do people want? What is going to get the most views? What are people going to be most interested in? That's not the first question that you should be asking. The first question that you should be asking and answering is, what am I going to be most proud of? What is going to make me most stoked to continue doing this? What am I wanting to put out into the world to show who I am as a human, not this curated caricature version of me that I've crafted so that the algorithm works in my favor? What you want to do is you want to talk about your core subject matter, right? Like for me, it's personal branding. And within personal branding, you have a bunch of different subtopics. But in addition to that core subject matter, you want to inject elements that show you, the human. You don't want your brand, in my opinion, to be based around just one sole thing, because you, the human, more than likely, is not based around one sole thing. And so that's why in my content, I will reference my Harley Davidsons, or the fact that I love metal, or the fact that I'm the biggest Seahawks fan imaginable, other than the guys that wear no shirts and they paint Seahawks across their chest in the middle of winter during the Seahawks games. I'm trying to share, in addition to the value I'm trying to provide you, I want you to know who I am as a human. One, because I'm interested in those things, I'm passionate, and I'm gonna want to talk about them. When I'm sitting and talking with my friends, those subject matters and those topics naturally come up. They should be coming up in the content as well, rather than trying to hide who you are and think that there's this world where you only talk about one thing ever, because that's what so many of the gurus online have told you to do. That is maybe a way to grow really quick on the platform, but it's also a way to quit really quickly from the platform. And so again, I am trying to help you build something that is sustainable. And so I want you to take a moment and really reflect on who you are as a human. The rest of the work that we're going to do in this video needs to be based off of that, not some ideal version that you think that your audience will desire, but who you are as a human. The next question that you should be trying to answer and solve is, why would your audience care? We know why they're going to listen to us, because we've established that we have the credibility that gives proof to why we have something good to say. But why are they going to care? What's in it for them? A mistake that I see you making is looking at what your competitors are doing and building your personal brand based on those findings. AKA, you're optimizing around your competitors, not your customers. Do you want more competitors? Whatever group you optimize for is the group that you're going to attract more of. If you optimize around what your customers actually want, not what your competitors are doing, but what your customers actually want and need, then you will attract more of them. So when you start with your customers, the way you do that is you identify what is the pain that they are facing. Ultimately, the main reason why we as humans consume educational content is there's some problem that we are looking to solve. There's some pain that we are feeling that we want relief from. You want to start by defining what the very painful problem is and what your unique solution is to it. Your brand should be built around that. It's a combination of who you are as a human, your expertise, and solving the problems that your customers actually face. That's what they care about. You probably have somebody in your life who is kind of the fixer, right? There's people in our lives that we know that are always fixing things. And what do we end up doing with them? We go to them when we have a problem. We also oftentimes will recommend our friends or family go to them with that same problem. If you become known as someone who solves your ideal customer's problems, guess what? More people will come to you. And so by building and optimizing your brand, not around being second best to the top dogs in your space and copying everything they do, but instead you start from the place of how do I solve real painful problems for my customer, then what you're going to find is that your brand becomes known as somebody who solves real problems, not somebody who just makes cool content online. Cool content online will get views and it will attract attention, but it doesn't build trust like solving problems does. And so if you know your ideal customer's painful problems, then that's going to help inform you of everything else that you need to work on through the rest of this video and the workbook associated with it. So make sure that you've downloaded the workbook, click the link below, download that, enter your information. It's literally just your email, I think, or something like that. And we're going to email you the workbook, and I want you to list out your customer's painful problems. What you're going to see in the workbook is it's asking you for 10 to 15. Some of you might not be able to come up with that many right now. That's okay. As many as you can. But what I will tell you is the more painful problems you identify, the more ideation you have for the content that you're going to make in the future. Now, one of the questions that we mentioned at the top of this video is, how do you stand out? And I'm sure this hits a painful nerve for you because more than likely you feel at some level like your space, your niche is saturated. You feel like there are a lot of individuals who are making content talking about the thing that you would be talking about or you are currently talking about. That's very real. There are more content creators online today than ever before. I think there's something like 700,000 hours of YouTube content uploaded every single day. Like, it's fucking absurd out here. And so you need an intentional and strategic way of actually standing out. And I believe that there are 3 different main levers that you can pull to stand out. Now, 2 of them are in your content, but today what I want to talk about is your contrarian belief. And this is the biggest lever in terms of the 3 levers that you can pull to stand out. I think this gives you the greatest returns out of all 3. Like, you can take the other 2, combine them, and they won't come even close to identifying your contrarian belief. This is the way that I believe you are going to get the best traction the quickest. You know that whole 80-20 principle that everybody always talks about? Well, I will tell you, this is your 80%. This is the thing that's going to drive the actual growth and make all the other things and initiatives you do for growing your personal brand a lot easier. Now, when I say contrarian belief or contrarian take, people misunderstand this. I've been on podcasts where I'll say that and they immediately regurgitate it, but instead of contrarian, they say controversial. I want to distinguish and define contrarian versus controversial because I will never, ever, ever tell you to be controversial for controversy's sake. I think that is a terrible, terrible approach. See, your contrarian belief is when you are going against the dominant belief because you actually genuinely believe it. You are incapable of not sharing this belief because at your core, it's so fucking true. Now, a controversial belief, on the other hand, is when you're taking a position because you know it's going to trigger people. This is when you design your statement to get a reaction. There are plenty of people that take this strategy on. There's plenty of people that preach it. And by all means, you do you, boo-boo. I am all for you taking whatever approach you desire. But what I will tell you is if you build that brand, you start to get known as somebody who is controversial. For you watching this, you've probably not been in these rooms, but I've worked with some of the biggest personal brands in the business world. And what I will tell you is that they avoid people who are highly controversial like the plague. Nobody who has a really strong established brand who is very thoughtful about the associations they make, they're not going to want to pair themselves with you if you're building just a controversial brand for controversy's sake. Most people who build a controversial brand, they're kind of known as a loose cannon. You don't know where that controversy is going to be aimed. I encourage you, build a contrarian belief, not a controversial belief. Now that we have that defined, let's go into how you go about building your contrarian belief. I really want you to identify the belief that you have that is fundamentally different than the other individuals in your space, in your niche, and be able to articulate that to your audience consistently. A couple examples that I think might help you understand just how impactful having a contrarian take is. Sometimes, as a side note, the contrarian take, when you hear it after the fact, you're like, that was contrarian? That's insane. Yvon Chouinard, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, let me know in the comments. He is the CEO and founder of Patagonia. And he was in an industry, the outdoor apparel world and industry, where they were hardcore about mass consumption and they prioritized profits over everything. He came onto the scene and built a company based on the belief that you should prioritize environmental stewardship, aka taking care of the fucking environment, rather than prioritizing profits. And so his actions followed. All the things that he has done within Patagonia point to the fact that he is actually caring more about the environment than he is about profits. And now he's known as the model for building an organization where it's value-led, not profit-led. And another example, the final one that I want to share, is Reed Hastings with Netflix. Everybody thought that people loved, absolutely adored, and held tightly the ability to go to their local Blockbuster or video rental store, there was the Hollywoods and all the other ones, and pick out the VHS. They wanted to physically hold them and read the back in order to understand what the video was going to be about. And Reed had this crazy contrarian belief that actually people don't want to leave their house. They want to be able to select a movie from their couch, have it delivered to their front door, be able to watch it, and then return it without ever leaving their home. And I think it's pretty obvious that contrarian take kind of worked. He started by shipping DVDs, right? So that you wouldn't have to go to the local store. You could just open your front door and boom, there it is. Watch it, open your front door, place it right back in the mailbox, and off we go. And eventually that evolved into not even having to open the front door, just having to literally flip on the switch of the TV and boom, you can stream. And I think it's pretty clear where that contrarian take not only took Reed Hastings and Netflix, but took the entire entertainment industry as a whole. Streaming is now the number one thing. That's what everybody is doing, right? Every single network that we used to watch on cable now has their own version of an OTT. I just can't hammer home just how important it is to have your contrarian belief. This is how you are going to stand out from all the other individuals in your space, in your niche. Hey, you're here because you're investing all of this time, money, and effort to build your personal brand, and you're not seeing any results. You might be seeing your views going up, but oftentimes sales aren't matching. It reminds me of one of the clients that we worked with this year. High-level media team, absolute gangsters, yet they hit a plateau. See, from a views and subscribers perspective, they were growing like crazy. But from a business perspective, all of this new attention was not converting into leads. It's because they thought they were making educational content when in reality, they were making entertainment content. So we walked them through our principles and tactics of how to make educational content, not entertainment. Their previous average per video was 4,000 to 5,000 leads. This video got over 20,000 leads. And even though they weren't optimizing for this, that video ended up being their number 3 video of the entire year with over 1 million views. This is why we created Ralston Select. Click the link in the description below if you want more information. Now let's get back to the video. So clearly, a great business and a great brand can be built off of a contrarian belief. But the question that you are probably asking is, how do I figure out what mine is? How do I know what my contrarian belief actually should be? Now, there's a chance that you actually do know it off top, right? Like, that was me. For years, I had been hearing people preach going viral and maximizing for views. And I just knew at my core, that was not the right way to build a personal brand where you're trying to actually grow your business if you sell a high ticket offer. It just didn't make sense to me. I knew it. And so when I would hear those things, I would have that reaction that I described earlier. My blood would boil, the hair on my neck would stand. Like, I would get a little annoyed and irritated. The first thing that you can think of is, what do you hear people in your industry say that rubs you the wrong way, that makes you go, I don't know if I completely agree with that? I guarantee there's several of these industry tropes that are out there that you fundamentally view differently. But if you are struggling with coming up with what your contrarian belief is, you don't totally know what it is, I have a very simple exercise that I want to walk you through that I think is wildly useful and will provide immense levels of clarity on what your contrarian belief could be, or potentially provide you several that then you can go and test in your content. It's called the 2-column approach. And what I want you to do is you're going to draw out 2 columns, or if you downloaded that workbook, you actually have this table right in front of you so you can fill it out. On the left side, you're going to write down all of the different things that people in your space or niche say that you disagree with. And on the right side, you're going to write out what your view of that is. I also, in addition to the statements that they say, I want you to write out the things that your competitors do that you disagree with, that you don't like, or that you think your customers hate. If you're an agency and most agencies are really slow to respond, terrible with communication, and not organized. That is less of a statement that they're making and more of their actions. And so what I want you to do is identify that on the left side. And then on the right side, I want you to write out what you would do differently. What this is it ends up being a list of contrarian takes. It's a contrarian belief or a contrarian action that then you can utilize for building your personal brand. When I started, I had 3. I'm going to share with you the belief that I disagreed with and what my view of it was. And I'm going to do that for 2 more after that, because I think it'll help get your wheels turning on what you could identify in your niche or your space that you don't fuck with. So the first one is always try to go viral, 1 million views or bust. That's what I hear so many people preaching. I believe and I preach that you should optimize for trust, not virality. That is my contrarian belief. Another one is that there's plenty of people out there that preach that you should be posting on every single platform. Volumes, mountains of content that you should be posting daily on every single platform imaginable. And the moment that a new platform appears in the App Store, you better download that, sign up for a new account, and be posting at least 20 times a day on it. Like it's crazy, right? And sure, that probably works, but it's not practical. I believe that you should build a system that you will actually stick with, not what your favorite creator does, okay? You need to build it around you, not optimizing around them. The third one is that you need your media team to fear you in order to respect you and listen to what you have to say. And it sounds kind of audacious when I say this, but if you're not in this world and you don't lead media teams and work with a lot of people that do, well, then you might not realize this, but this is a very, it's weird, but it's a common belief that a lot of people have. And my contrarian belief, my contrarian take on that is that you need to create an environment of psychological safety or the work will suffer. Creative will suffer if they don't feel safe to take risks. And so these are the 3 contrarian takes that I entered onto the scene with. When we first started building my personal brand, I talked about all 3 of these in podcasts and in my content. But what I did is I started to notice that one of them was clearly resonating with the audience more than the other 2. We're at a point right now where all of a sudden I'm seeing more and more people talk about optimizing for trust than virality. When I first started making content a year ago, that was not the case. There were very few people preaching this message. And so what I noticed is it was catching fire. People were resonating with it and understood it. They agreed with it. They were frustrated and tired of the old way of building a personal brand online. And so when I noticed that, instead of trying to force all 3 onto my audience, I doubled down on the one that was clearly resonating with you. And by the way, thank you for resonating with that. That's the one that I am most passionate about. And so this actually worked out really well for me because the one that I like to preach and share with as many people one-on-one or in small group settings as possible, I'm now able to preach and shout from the mountaintops in my content, not because it's what I want, but because it's what you have told me you wanted. So once you've done the exercise, you'll have identified a couple of different contrarian takes. And I want you to test them in your content. And then once you notice that one is resonating more with your audience, just like I described with my contrarian take around optimizing for trust over virality, once you notice that, I want you to double and triple down with your audience on sharing that statement over and over and over again. Now, the natural question that you have is, how do I know that they're resonating with it? Yes, I do read your DMs. I do read your comments. I knew you were about to ask that question. And it's a very fair question. And There's a lot of different places that you can look to as indicators that your audience is fucking with this. Look at the piece of content where you're talking about this contrarian belief. Are people commenting, literally quoting your contrarian belief back at you? That's a big sign. That's something that I see a lot of times as a great indicator. Another one is if you make a video that is central around, or a piece of content in general, it could be a blog post, a Substack, whatever. If you make a piece of content around your contrarian belief and you get more DMs than normal referencing that piece of content, that is another good indicator that your audience is fucking with this. If you get to a point where things start getting really crazy for you, and this is a wild point to get to with your personal brand, it blows my mind every time I see it. If people start making content talking about your contrarian take and tagging you in it, that's when you really know this thing has gone intergalactic. This is what you're going to build your brand around. This is what you become known for. If you actually listen to your audience and you actually pay attention to what they're saying to you, you will know. You'll know that they're liking this one more than the other ones. And that actually brings up a really important point, which I haven't really talked about much ever in my content, which is who should you be listening to? Not what creators should you be listening to. You, as the creator, who should you be listening to inform the pivots or lack of pivots that you make with your personal brand? And it's a very interesting discussion that happens online. You have half of the camp that falls into the belief that you should respond to every comment, read every comment, and take it as doctrine, as gospel. And then you have the other camp that is like, ignore the comments completely, make whatever you want, and never take into account what they have to say. And I think there needs to be a happy medium. But first we need to define, what are you doing? I believe that if you have a mass market, low ticket offer that you are selling, this is why you're building your personal brand, is to lead towards that, drive sales, build your business. If that's the world that you're in, then I do think you can listen to the audience in your comment section. If they're saying that they want more of something or they want less of something, I think it's worth listening to them. Now, on the flip side, if you have a narrow market, high ticket offering, I don't know that it makes sense to listen to what the audience is saying in your comment section to dictate how you build your personal brand. I think you need to go to a different group of people. I think what you need to do is look at what your customers are saying, what they want more of, what the questions are that they have. That's what you want to optimize around, because whatever group you optimize around is the group that you're going to get more of. Do you want more followers or do you want more customers? For me, I want more customers. I love that you are subscribed to my channel. If you're not, you should hit that subscribe button. I've never said that before, but it just felt natural here. But I'm not looking to build my follower count. I'm looking to build my business. And so I want to optimize. I care about everyone who's watching the content greatly. And it's not to say that I don't look at your comments and take it into account. But the biggest driver of the pivots or adjustments or the things that we'll double down on for my personal brand comes from our clients. And so back to noticing that people were resonating with optimizing for trust, not virality. Yes, the general audience was fucking with that very clearly. But more importantly, my ideal clients were. I was getting DMs from people that I knew but had never worked with for years that were saying, oh my God, this makes so much sense. I click with this. I'm so tired about working with this agency that is having me film these topics that we know are going to get millions of views, but I could give less than a fuck about. My Instagram has turned into something that I'm ashamed of, not something that I'm proud of. And so that's what we're optimizing around. Again, I want to leave you with this on this point. This is super, super important. The group that you optimize around is the group that you will get more of. If you optimize around your followers, sure, you'll get more followers. But if you optimize around your customers, you will get more customers. Now, once you land on that contrarian belief, that contrarian take that you're going to really lean into, what you're going to want to do with that is you need to craft what I call a brand statement. This is a way for you to clearly and concisely communicate that contrarian belief so that you can say it as many times as you fucking can in the content that you make, okay? I believe that you want to consistently pair yourself with that belief so that eventually your audience makes that association. I'm going to share a lot more on that in just a second. But it's kind of like how Apple and Johnny Ive have created the association with Apple being a design first, not a processor or tech first company. When you think of Apple, I would bet you're not thinking about the technical. You think about the design. And I don't believe they became known as a design company because of their marketing. I believe they became known as a design company because for years they consistently paired themselves with a very clear contrarian approach to building computers and ultimately hardware design as a whole. Johnny Ive is known for approaching design with simplicity, clarity, restraint, not being overly done, but actually exercising discipline and having an elegant approach to a world that the word elegant couldn't have been further away from. And Apple continued to pair themselves with this for 20 years, okay? So now when you hear Apple, you don't think processor first, you think design first. And so again, make sure that you downloaded the workbook and you do the 2-column exercise. This is going to give you the ammo that then you can go into the world making your content to test which of these contrarian takes, which one is resonating with the customer or the audience that I'm optimizing for. My ideal customer, that's what you want to optimize around. Again, if you have a mass market low ticket offering, cool. Your ideal customer is loud in your comments. But typically, if you have a high ticket, narrow market offer, what I have found is my ideal client, more often than not, they end up texting, DMing, or emailing me rather than commenting publicly on the piece of content. And I don't need to get into the why behind that, but that's just the reality. And so in my world, I'm optimizing more around the private messages I'm receiving than the public comments I'm getting. And so that pairing that we're talking about of Apple pairing themselves with design first thinking leads to an association. If you haven't heard me define these terms, I want to actually define branding and brand for you because this is how you're going to determine how you want to be viewed. At its core, branding is just a pairing of things. And I believe that brand is the byproduct of that. A good brand is when your audience inherently associates you and the thing that you are intentionally pairing yourself with. If Apple is for 20 years straight consistently pairing themselves with design first thinking, it's no surprise for us that the association that we draw upon very quickly when thinking of Apple is design. That's how this actually works. That's how branding works and how the byproduct occurs, which is brand. A really simple example is below this cool shirt that I just recently got, below it is a black t-shirt, just plain, right? And if you see me in a plain black t-shirt, there's not that much to draw upon. You're more looking at maybe, my rings, my glasses, my hat, whatever. There's not that much to go off of. Now, if I were to take that same plain black t-shirt and slap a black metal logo, like a Swedish or Norwegian black metal band that you can't even read, that might change how you perceive me. You suddenly have different associations that you're drawing upon. Why? Because I'm pairing myself with that logo. Now, if we were to exchange that black metal logo for a Hello Kitty logo, might be a different perception, might be some different associations that you draw upon, right? So what you, the brand, what you pair yourself with consistently informs the brand that your audience sees. This is the lens, this is the filter that they view you through. And so you want to be very thoughtful and strategic with the pairings that you make. Knowing this, I think you're going to want to be a little bit more thoughtful with the words that come out of your mouth and the people that you show up publicly with. And so the formula that you can think of is pairing times consistency equals an association. Pairing times consistency equals association. Here's an example that I want to share with you. You're very familiar probably with Instagram stories. I think it's something that we interact with on a pretty regular basis. For me, it's a too many times per day, as my screen time report on my phone is constantly telling me. If you look at Instagram stories, for example, let's say you meet somebody recently and you both follow each other on Instagram. You don't know that much about this person. And so what's going to end up happening is whatever you see them consistently posting in their Instagram story is going to shape the brand that you develop or the brand that you view them through, the lens that you view them through. For example, you connect with Sarah and you now follow Sarah on Instagram. And suddenly you start noticing that Sarah posts a lot of black metal songs in her stories. What are you going to assume? It's simple. It's not like some loaded question. The answer is you're going to assume that she's into black metal, right? Pairing times consistency equals association. She is consistently pairing herself with black metal songs. And so the association is she must like black metal. Now, if you're one of those people who love Amish romance novels and you're posting a screenshot of your favorite Amish romance novel in your story, I'm going to make the assumption that you like Amish romance novels. And even more than that, if I have known people in my life previously who have liked Amish romance novels, I am going to associate not only you with the Amish romance novel, I'm going to associate you with what it means in my life to like an Amish romance novel. Okay? It's a little heady there, but basically the point being is whatever you consistently pair yourself with, that is the association that your audience is going to start creating for your brand. Now, something that we want to be careful and wary of is we've described this from like a positive frame, right? I love black metal, so I think it's very positive to be associated with black metal. But this works equally as powerfully in the reverse. Okay, so just as effective as it is for a positive association, it's also just as effective for a negative one. If you pair yourself with something or someone that is the opposite of what your desired outcome is, that is the opposite of the brand that you want to build and what you want to be known for, then that be a bad pairing. That's not a good pairing for you to make. That's not what you want to do. I'm trying to build a trustworthy brand. I want to be known as a trusted figure. And so knowing that this is how branding works, it would be really fucking stupid of me to start consistently showing up online with people who are known as untrustworthy characters. If I show up with untrustworthy individuals consistently, you are going to start wondering if I'm trustworthy myself. Like I said, these associations are the lens that your audience views you through. And the way that you can actually control and set these associations is by being intentional with the pairings that you consistently make. Now, I'm a huge fan of reverse engineering from a desired outcome to today. I try to apply that way of thinking to as much that I do in my work life and in my personal life as humanly possible. And it's what I want to do here with your desired associations. In that workbook that if you haven't downloaded yet, click the link in the description, enter your email, we'll email you the workbook. In your workbook, there's a desired associations exercise. I think it's called that or something like that. And what it's going to prompt you to do is, it's very simple. I want you to write out 2 associations that you want to be known as being for, and I want you to write out 2 associations that you want to be known as being against. Just as much as you want to build a brand as what you are going towards, you also want to build a brand that speaks to what you are not willing to do, what you do not want. Something that a lot of luxury brands do a really good job of is not only speaking to who they do make their product for, but who their product is not for. And by doing that, you create an exclusivity for the audience that you are actually building and optimizing around. And so this is how you're going to be able to reverse engineer these desired associations. And once you determine what those are, the next logical question you need to ask yourself and answer is, well, in order to get those associations, what do I need to consistently pair myself with? This gives you the actions in order to shape the associations that your audience makes when thinking of your brand. It's no longer this crapshoot where you're, pulling the lever at the slot machine and hoping that you get all 3 bananas. Like, this is how you do it intentionally, not with guesswork. Now, watching this video, you're probably at the beginning of building your personal brand, or you saw this and realized you don't like your personal brand and you want almost like a restart or a refresh. And so what I'm about to walk you through at this stage that you're at might feel absurd. I want to walk you through and talk about some brand threats. And in the beginning stages, this feels audacious. This feels insane. Like you can't even imagine that there would be a threat to your brand right now because you're just in the beginning stage. But let me tell you, this is a very, very real thing. There's been several incidents this year where people have come to us and worked with us for a short period of time purely to help solve a problem they were having with their brand publicly. You know, one could call it a little PR disaster moment. And this is something that I think, sure, you're gonna have things that you can't predict, but a lot of the time, if you build with the right foundation, I think you can avoid a lot of these brand problems and brand threats that a lot of personal brands find themselves encountering in the first couple of years of establishing who they are online. And the thing that I want you to really be thinking about is what you say now publicly creates the lens that your audience is going to view you through. And what you claim that you are strong and staunch about, your audience will hold you to that for a lot longer than maybe you realize right now. Like maybe you hate how authors or subject matter experts pump out a new book every year because that indicates that it must be a shitty or low quality book. I believe that if you say that enough, a year, 2 years, 3 years, even 4 or 5 years down the road, it might be very difficult for you to ever do something like put out a book every single year, or even just put out a book in general. And this might seem surprising to you, but you'll be shocked at how much your audience can latch on to some of these messages. You have no idea what the future holds. And so I would encourage you, I'm not saying don't take any strong stances, but keep your optionality open. If you really truly believe it, like you'll die on that fucking hill, say it, right? Like I talk about optimizing for trust over virality. That's something that I'm not going to change. I do not foresee that changing. But there's other things that maybe I believe that I'm not interested in doing right now, but maybe in 5 years, I learned that that would be really important and impactful for our business. And that's something that we need to do. And so I want to be careful about restricting my future ability to act based on current statements and thoughts that I share in my content haphazardly without real intentional thought. It's kind of like what my mom always told me about tattoos. Only get it if you're still going to be proud of it when you're in your 50s and 60s. I would encourage you to think about the things that you say and the statements you make in your content and the stances that you take. Is it a stance that you're still going to be proud of and agree with in 5, 10, 15 years? If not, I would take a second stab at maybe thinking about whether or not you want to say that publicly. Because what you can end up doing is actually creating a prison that your brand lives within and cannot escape. For example, there was a time where I was working with a creator where it became wildly difficult for us to sell a product that we were selling and had, because they had built the expectation for a long time that they were just giving away free content and that was all they were ever going to do. Even though they had given a lot of goodwill to the audience and done really well by the audience, when they went to make this transition of informing their audience of an offer they had, their audience got pretty pissy about it. And the reason why is because they set up expectations that this would never happen. What you say now influences your ability to act later. Now, I'm not saying, and please don't get it twisted and misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying you can't change your position down the road. You absolutely can. I admire people that admit that they said one thing one way and they have new information now and they're changing their view on something, right? But just like in politics, whenever a politician, and it's very rare that they do this, whenever a politician comes out and says, I held this position and now I believe it differently, sure, I respect and admire that, and I think you probably do, but the masses ridicule them and critique them heavily. It's very difficult as a public figure on whatever spectrum, whether it's massive or even a small little community of people, it's very difficult for humans to see you say something consistently and now say something different. And so what I would recommend is, if you believe that this is something worth dying on the hill for, cool, by all means, say it, share it. But if you don't, I would question whether or not this is worth sharing publicly, because you can make a change in what you believe. You can change your stance, but you will deal with backlash. I promise you that. I'm not saying that's a reason to not do it. I'm not saying backlash is the worst thing in the world, but it is something that you should know that you are going to experience if you go about changing your views, beliefs, and opinions on things that you have been consistently saying for a significant amount of time. Now, so much of this video has been focusing around you and how all these different elements of who you are. And so we're really clear on you, right? We know who you are. But the question is, should you assume that your audience knows who you are when they're engaging with your content? And more than likely, you have made the mistake, or you've seen another creator make the mistake where they make content for a warm audience. They have inside jokes. They have all these little things that only their warmest, most consistent audience understands and knows. I assume a lot of times in my content that you know my background and the different work that I've done in my career. But the reality is you don't. And so I need to, at some point in the video, give a qualifier or give some credibility so that somebody, you, who doesn't know who I am, wants to listen to what I have to say. But the mistake here that I want to correct is thinking that your audience knows who you are. What you should be doing is every piece of content you make, you should assume that the person watching it has no clue anything about you, who you are, what you stand for, what your preferences are, what your interests are, what your track record is. None of that is known by the audience. And so I would tell you that everything you do with your personal brand, you should approach it through the lens of, these people are witnessing or experiencing me for the first time. And with that in mind, you're going to contextualize things a little bit differently. It's kind of like when you're talking to a group that you've just recently met versus friends you've known for 13, 14 years. It's going to be a wildly different conversation. With this new group, if you mention, Valerie, I'm going to have to mention the fact that Valerie is my mom's name. That is something that my friends all know, but a new group doesn't. That's a very simple example, but you need to apply that way of thinking to building your personal brand. It's kind of like what I said earlier, which is the principle of whatever group you optimize for is the group that you're going to get more of. If you optimize your content around a warm audience, you're just going to continue with your current audience, and you're going to have a very tough time bringing new people into your world. If, however, you optimize for a cold audience, and cold and warm just means cold, they don't know who you are. Warm, they do know who you are. If you optimize for a cold audience, you're going to attract more of those individuals. But guess what? The cold audience, they come up to your front door, you open the door and you say, come on in, the fire's warm and there's hot cocoa in the kitchen. That's how you can convert them from being a cold audience to being a warm audience. You're not going to ever convert them if they don't engage with your content. And they won't engage with your content if in the beginning you're alluding to things that only people who know you would understand. I hope this makes sense. This is a huge mistake that some of the biggest creators in the spaces and niches that you follow and admire, this is the mistake that a lot of them are making. Don't make the same mistake. Now, a funny part in this is, in order for you to be able to share what your brand is and what you stand for, you kind of need to know. In order to be able to explain what your personal brand is and what it stands for, you need to understand that. And so that's why we've been focusing on what we've been focusing on in this video. Everyone wants to jump to content strategy right away. What is the content strategy that's going to get me 1 million views or whatever? That shit doesn't matter. If you get 1 million views around a brand that you don't understand, how the fuck are those 1 million people ever going to actually understand what your brand stands for? Here's the secret. They won't. And so you don't want to be doing that. Please make sure you understand your brand so that you can then communicate what your brand is and who you are to a cold audience, and then you can convert them into a warm audience. Now, a little caveat that I want to add here. I'm going to share a moment of interesting vulnerability. I'm in my first year of building my personal brand, and we've put out, to date, as of filming this video, we've put out, I believe, 9 videos. 8 videos? 9 videos. Thank you, Trevor. We've put out 9 videos to date. We're still in the early stages. We're still in our first year of putting content out on YouTube. And something that I noticed is in our most recent video on YouTube, we got some comments saying that we were getting a little bit more repetitive. I saw the comment and immediately I was like, oh, okay, I want to make sure that we're not doing anything that is going to bore the audience. Like I want to make sure we're providing value and usefulness and all of those things. And so I had a little moment, like a little mini panic attack. Nah, that's a little dramatic. I had a moment where I was like, a gasp is more realistic. Then Trevor and I were really thinking about it and we're like, okay, we're in our first year. So yes, we are going to optimize our content around a cold audience. But something that we can do a better job of in 2026 is doing both. You want to make sure that you are doing a good job of making content that is for new audience acquisition and a good job of making content that is providing current audience nurture. And if you're missing one or the other, what's going to happen is one is you're not attracting anybody new. And so you're only just working with the people that are currently in your audience. If you're only optimizing for the new audience and not nurturing the old, it's like a leaky bucket. You're going to be adding water in all the time, but as you're adding in more water, you've got water escaping. So you're staying at the same level. You're not going to see the numbers on your content, or more importantly, the conversions for your business go up, because what happens is every new person that comes in, you have one of the current members leave. And so you need to make sure from a personal brand, high level perspective, that you're thinking about not only the cold audience. I'm telling you, hardcore optimize and make every video assuming that they're a cold audience, but also make sure that you are nurturing the warm audience, the people that have already showed you that they are loyal and care about you and what you are producing. So earlier I teased that brand statement. This is where you're able to take that contrarian belief that you have identified, right? You probably identified a couple. Then you started testing them in your content and seeing which one was resonating the most. And that's the one you're going to double down on. Once you have that contrarian take that you're going to double down on, you need to form it in a very clear and concise statement, okay? Why do you want to do that? Well, what did we talk about earlier? What is branding? It's consistently pairing yourself with something. And the byproduct of that is your brand. If you want to build a brand that stands out, it needs to be a contrarian take, but you need to be able to say it consistently in the content you produce. And so I believe that what you want to do is take all the work that we've done so far, and there's been a lot of it. You want to take that and put it into one single statement that you're able to articulate in any scenario, shape, or form. Okay? I say it in the content that we're making for our own channels. I say it if I go on a podcast, or on the rare occasion where I speak at an event, I will share it there. And my brand statement is as follows. I believe that business owners and entrepreneurs trying to grow their business through their personal brand should optimize for trust, not virality. There's a lot that is communicated in that statement. The beautiful thing is I'm communicating who I serve, how I serve them, and what I do differently than my competitors. 3 important things to make it very clear to my ideal customer why they should choose me or not choose me over my competitors. It makes it very easy for them to make a decision. We want to make things easy for people to decide on, not just for buying and converting with you, but also whether or not they're going to opt in to consume the content in general. We want this to be an easy decision for them. So there is an exercise that walks you through, it's very simple, the framework that I use for crafting a brand statement. I'm not saying this is the only way that you can make a brand statement. There's other ways that you can do it, but this is a very simple and effective way to do it. And what it does is it produces something that communicates to your audience who you serve, how you do it, and what makes you different than your competitors. And so in the workbook, make sure you downloaded it. If you didn't, it's the link in the description. Click that link, enter your email. We're going to email you the workbook. In the brand statement section, you're going to follow the framework. I believe, insert your audience, who want their core desire, should your contrarian belief, not common belief in niche or space. If you fill this in, you're going to have something that you can regurgitate and say in any scenario, day or night, awake tired, good mood, bad mood, whatever, it's very easy for you to say. I can say my brand statement in my sleep. In fact, if you ask my girlfriend, I'm sure there's been times where I have said it in the middle of the night while I'm dreaming. This becomes the powerful leverage that you have to amplify your brand and stand out from all these other fuckers, just kidding, all these other individuals who are lovely and wonderful in your space that you want to differentiate yourself from. You want to separate yourself from the pack. This is how you do it, okay? Another analogy that we shared earlier is how Apple consistently paired themselves with design first thinking. And then what happened? We start thinking of design when we think of Apple. You have to say this statement over and over and over again so that when your audience thinks of you, they think of this statement. I believe that we, through a very low volume of content, have done this very effectively in our first year of building my personal brand. So much so that last year, there was a video that we put out that was really long. It's like 3.5 hours long. And one of the comments on the video was calling out the fact that this is too long, too boring, too educational to ever get 1 million views. And before I could even respond, you or other people in the audience were going and commenting, saying and informing this person, that's not what I'm optimizing for. They beat me to it. They knew and they know what I am trying to build and what I'm optimizing around, which is trust, not virality. And they know that because I am consistently pairing myself with it, okay? And so please go through that exercise. It might take you a little bit longer than you think. It seems really simple when I say it out loud, but then when you go to put pen to paper, it actually takes a little while. So block some real meaningful time to craft this. Once you have this, I think you're gonna be blown away at the results that you get on how you stand out compared to others in your space. Now that you understand your brand, it's time to amplify it with your content strategy. Now, the first thing that I want to immediately flag and qualify is saying that there is a lot of nuance to this viral versus trust conversation and debate. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to make the assumption that you have a high ticket offer that you're selling to a very specific and fairly narrow group of people, okay? It's not like you have a probiotic soda that you're selling or an anti-aging cream, right? For those kinds of brands, going viral is a lot more effective. It's actually kind of a biggie that you really want. But if you are selling a high ticket offer to a very narrow group, well, I think it's probably the case that maybe going viral is not as useful as some of your local gurus on Instagram will have you believe. So what I want to do is I want to break down what optimizing for going viral typically looks like how it actually goes based on my 17 years of experience. Now, I'm not saying this is always the case. There are obviously outliers, and this is, to be clear, when it goes well, when you do it really, really good. When you optimize for going viral, you start getting more views, a lot more views, and you start gaining a lot more followers, which is wonderful. You're seeing everything move up and to the right on all the social platforms. But here's what actually happens. When you do this, when you optimize for virality, inherently you have to make content that is wider, okay? And typically what this ends up doing is diluting the message. Think of it like a shot of whiskey versus a whiskey and Coke. Going viral and optimizing for virality is like having a whiskey and Coke when you really want the foolproof whiskey that burns as it goes down, right? That's what you are looking for, okay? And so in doing this, what you end up doing is you create wide content that is vanilla and attracts followers and viewers off of that content. But what are they wanting more of? That same shit that you brought them in with. It's not like they're coming in from some really wide vanilla piece of content and all of a sudden being like, yes, I would love a very deep breakdown on how I can conduct my marketing funnel from Instagram to my email and then convert on the back end. Like, they don't give a fuck about that shit. And so what I have seen, and I have been a part of a team where the creator wanted to do this, okay? And what happens is originally you're building and optimizing your audience around solving problems for them, taking the painful problems that they deal with and helping them solve them. But over time, as you go wider, you no longer serve their need. So what do they stop doing? Consuming your content. So what you're doing is you're bringing in all these people that are not interested in the high ticket niche offer that you have, And they're coming in, but they don't care to buy. They have no interest in it. Meanwhile, the people that were buying from you are now tuning you out because your content no longer serves them. So as views and followers are going up to the right, guess what sales are doing? Straight down. It suddenly becomes so clear. You end up alienating the people that actually want to buy from you. How dumb, right? Yet you are considering doing this. I've considered doing this. Many creators that I love and respect and admire and look up to have considered or have done this in a season. You don't have to make that mistake. I'm sharing the mistake with you right now so you don't have to go down that road and learn this lesson the painful way. Because what I will tell you is it is extremely painful to wake up one day and realize the people that were buying from you no longer give a shit about what you're putting out because what you're putting out does not serve them. It's kind of like how I tend to gain weight. One day I wake up, I'm like, oh shit, I put on 20 pounds, right? I wasn't paying attention. I was just going, living my life, doing things and being busy. And then one day I'm like, oh fuck. It's the same in this instance. You don't realize it as it's happening until one day your ideal customer, maybe somebody that you know and previously had a relationship with or still do, they tell you something like, I used to consume your content. I loved it. I haven't watched a single video in the last 6 months because none of it has helped me. None of it has been helping me solve the problems and the painful problems that I have within my business or whatever use case you're making content around, right? Maybe you were helping people lose weight and keep track of their calories and, get at least 15,000 steps a day, whatever. And suddenly you're starting to make videos where you're comparing candy bars. That's no longer serving your customer's need. And so what's going to happen is they're going to start to tune out your content. Now, on the other hand, if you optimize for building trust, I believe that is going to provide insane results for your business. Why is that going to provide insane results? Well, I think in order to answer that question, we have to define what trust is. And I have a very simple definition that I think will be very useful for you. I believe that trust is how much you believe that someone or something will meet your expectations in the future based on how they have behaved in the past. If I go out to start my Harley Davidson, okay, I flip the switch on and then I start it. If all of a sudden, tomorrow, I go out there and I press the ignition button and it doesn't start, it just petters and it just dies. Do you believe that the next day when I go out there, if I do nothing different, that I am going to trust that it's going to start? A little bit less, okay? That, I believe, is a very simple version of how trust works. So then, how do you optimize your content around building trust rather than going viral? Well, I think it's actually very simple. You need to identify what the painful problems are that you are solving for your ideal customer. What is your unique solution to that painful problem? How do you go about solving it differently than others? I'm not saying make shit up, but just look at what do you do a little differently than some of your competitors? And then the third thing, you need to set expectations of what the painful problem is that we're going to solve in this video. The next step is you need to make it easy for them to take the actions to go from here to here. What do they need to do in order to get the outcome they desire, to solve the problem that they're looking to solve? And if you do that and repeat over and over, I believe that your audience is going to have a strong belief that you will meet or even exceed expectations in the future. This is a beautiful thing. Why? Because it means that they're going to continue to believe that you will deliver. And if they believe that you're going to continue to deliver, when you suddenly make them aware of an offer that you have, the likelihood that they believe you'll deliver on that offer goes up. So the likelihood that they actually convert goes up. And the reason why they believe that is because they trust they're going to get more out of what you provide in your offer than what they invest. Why? Because that's what's been happening for the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 months, however long you've been making content. Those actions on repeat builds that pattern of trust in your audience. It's incredible what this can do. And so it takes this wildly confusing thing of how do I build trust and makes it very simple. These are the very basic actions that you need to take in order to increase this trust with your audience. Now, something you'll hear a lot of people talking about is who should you be listening to in future ideation on your content, right? Do you go to the comment section as your source? Do you go to your customers? Which one do I do? Well, it's going to depend on what your offer is. If your offer is a mass market, not niche offering, and it's low ticket, well then yeah, you can look at the comment section as inspiration. Why? Because you have more people in the comment section that are reflective of what your buyer looks like, acts like, and who they are. On the flip side, if you're like me and you have a high ticket offering, well, maybe the comment section isn't going to be the best place for you to optimize off of, because maybe those are people who are consuming your content, engaging with it. They're awesome. I love them, but they're not the type that is going to actually end up buying my offering, right? My one-on-one service, or even potentially joining one of our group offerings. Whatever group you want more of, that's what you should optimize for. If you want more followers, cool. Listen to your followers, make the content they're asking you for. But if you want more customers, what are your customers asking for? I want to be clear. I care about what you, the audience, is saying in the comment section. I don't want that to get misunderstood. But what I want to share with you is that the majority of my content that I put out, the customers that we end up working with, this is not a rule, it's an observation. Oftentimes they don't comment publicly on the content. They will DM, they'll text, they'll email privately. And so I'm looking at those conversations and what are those people finding useful? What are their follow-up questions that they want more in-depth information on? This is how I'm optimizing my content. And it's how, if you have a high ticket offer, it's how I recommend you optimize yours. This is the source that you want to go to, your customers, not necessarily your followers. But the thing is you're never going to get to the point of reaching your ideal customer, because it's not like the first video you put out, boom, all of a sudden thousands of people are seeing it. That's not what usually happens. You have to go through the painful period of doing this for a while with very little results. And the only reason that you're going to stick with it is if you build a system and a foundation that is actually sustainable. Not trying to copy what your favorite content creator is doing, not trying to replicate what the guru on your Instagram feed is telling you need to do by being on every single platform all at once, posting 10 to 20 times a day. That's ludicrous. I mean, there's a crazy stat that up to 73% of people who start making content quit within their first year. Within their first year. All the investment that you made, all of the uncomfy feelings that you went through and being public and everything was for nothing. And so you're watching this video because you want to build something that will last. So let's build a foundation and a content strategy that will do the same. So what does it mean to build a sustainable system and foundation? It means that your content strategy needs to fit within the constraints of your business, your life, and your experience level. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm like one of those woo-woo people. I'm saying you have realities based on the business, life, and experience that you have. You might only have 1 or 2 hours a week that you can dedicate to content. Another person watching this video might have up to 10 hours a week that they can dedicate. Everybody has different constraints on their time and bandwidth, right? Like energy bandwidth, mental bandwidth, not just the time. You need to reverse engineer what your work, your life, and the experience level that you have. And by that, I mean like how much content have you filmed on camera? You're going to want to build a system that eases you into it. I didn't start off this year making content, putting out a video every single week on YouTube. That would have been fucking absurd for me. I was not used to being on camera. I had to ease my way into it. Okay. And so that's what I mean by creating a sustainable system and foundation to work from. You'll get way greater returns doing 20-minute walks every day for the rest of your life than 6 months of Ronnie Coleman-esque working out. It's the same with your content strategy. If you post a low volume, but consistently for many years, you're going to beat the creator that tried to sprint hard for a year and then burned out and gave up after 12 months. And honestly, this is what kind of separates you, the business owner, from the average creator. You have a business that you are running. And so your content strategy and system needs to complement what your business looks like and what your day-to-day in the business looks like, not some round hole that we're trying to jam a square peg into. I can't tell you how many different systems I've had to design based on the entrepreneur. I've worked with entrepreneurs who are incredibly busy and they literally have like at most 60 seconds a week where they can actually dedicate time to making specific content for the platform. The rest of their content is purely documented. It's just somebody following them around and filming them. I've also worked with individuals who allocate up to 12 to 18 hours a week for filming, where they'll sit down for a full 12-hour session on a Friday and film all fucking day. There's all kinds of versions of this across the spectrum here, but it doesn't matter what others are doing. You need to look at what your day-to-day looks like and then build the system from there. So some questions that I would encourage you to answer in the workbook, and just a reminder, if you haven't downloaded it, download the workbook. There's a link in the description down below. All you gotta do is click the link, enter your email, check your email. We sent you the workbook. You can download it and go through all of these exercises along with me. And this exercise has some questions that I want you to answer. They're gonna be like prompts. They're basically gonna help you develop and understand, what does my actual capacity for content look like? How many hours a week do you actually have for content? Or what parts of the content creation process bring you energy? What parts drain you? What time of day are you most on? Where is your brain the sharpest? Or where do you communicate the best? I know for me, I am the sharpest and the best in the morning. In the morning is where I am primed. That's where I am my best, okay? And so we try to orient as much as we can. Today, we've been filming all day, but we do our best to orient our film sessions to when I have the best energy and when I communicate and verbally process the best. Make sure that you go through the worksheet, answer these questions. It's not anything complex, but it's something that I guarantee you have not sat down and done. And so by putting this together, you are able to then build your content system, reverse engineering the amount of time that you have available, rather than trying to keep up this unsustainable thing that you know is just a ticking time bomb for you to give up at any point. Real quick, I just want to say I am so sorry. I know that this is a lot to take in right now, and even more for you to take action on. But that is the whole reason why we created Ralston Select. Ralston Select is your one-stop destination to not only learn, but to actually implement. We're talking pre-production, production, post-production, and platform strategy, all through the lens of educational content. Click the link in the description below if you want more information. Now let's get back to the video. Now, the next thing that we need to do after that we've understood, like, okay, we have these foundations on how we're going to do content, we need to choose our medium. And this is really, really simple. There's 4 different mediums or ways of making content. There's video, audio, written, and graphic content. And instead of picking the medium that all of your favorite content creators are doing, or the medium that everybody online is talking about, pick the one that is most natural for you. If you're already writing stuff, if you're really into the written word, well then I would argue maybe the best way for you to start is with Substack rather than trying to do long form YouTube videos. Especially if the idea of being on camera makes you like shudder. I wouldn't push you into doing that. I want you to work your way up to doing that. On the flip side, if you want to communicate verbally, but the idea of being on camera is scary, audio is going to be a great method for you. No matter what it is, I want you to pick how are you going to communicate your ideas and thoughts and who you are as a human most authentically. That's the medium that we're going to go with. Now, the clear and obvious reality here is video is the best, as in you can get the most out of video. When you film a video, you can then clip a short. You can take the audio and make it a podcast. You can take the transcript and write LinkedIn posts, emails, whatever, right? Substacks. You are able to pull so much from video. But again, if that's not what you fuck with, if that terrifies you, then you're probably not going to stick with it. Or realistically, you're probably not going to ever start in the first place. And so I would tell you, pick something that you can get momentum on and allow the momentum to guide you into the next medium that you choose. And now, once we have our medium, we need to pick our platform. Oh my God, this is where I think so many people go wrong and they misunderstand a lot of messages that people share online. Everybody talks about dominating all the platforms, being everywhere all at once, being omnipresent. And here's the reality. That is a terrible strategy for you. You are not Gary Vee. You're not Gary Vaynerchuk. You're not Cody Sanchez, okay? Trying to be everywhere all at once will cause you more harm than good at this stage. You will make diluted bullshit content. I can tell you with absolute certainty. Rather than trying to focus on all of them, I think you want to focus on a very select few. Like let's say, for example, I all of a sudden tell my girlfriend, I'm gonna take up this new hobby of rock climbing. And all of a sudden, the first time that I'm gonna go rock climbing, I decide to do the scramble up K2. Now, if you don't know what K2 is, it's an extreme mountain that is very difficult to summit. Many people have unfortunately passed actually in trying to do it. I'm using an extreme example here, but that's what a lot of you think you can do with your content strategy. You think that you can get into climbing and suddenly climb one of the most complex mountains in the fucking world. You think that you can start making content and make content at the volume and cadence that the best creators in the world that have been doing this for years, that have teams of 10, 20, 30 people behind them are doing. And that is ludicrous. And so if you're starting off solo just as yourself, what I want you to do is pick one primary platform and one secondary platform. Let's use the example of YouTube and Instagram, okay? What you're gonna do is you're gonna make pillar content for your primary platform, okay? That's YouTube. That's the main dish that you are making, a long form direct-to-camera video like this. That could be an example of the content that you're making as your primary platform pillar content. And so this is an example of my pillar content. It's a long form piece of content that I'm then going to use this pillar content from my primary platform in order to create content for my secondary platform, in this example, Instagram. Which means you might just take the direct-to-camera long-form YouTube video and you might cut or clip moments for Instagram Reels. Or you might get a little crazy and saucy and you mine a moment that you really love, you want to rewrap it as a carousel for Instagram. That would be another way of utilizing this process. See, your primary platform, that's the one that gets the energy and the innovation. Your secondary platform gets repurposed content. It's not that you don't care about it, but it's that you're not putting any of your energy towards innovation on that platform. You're reserving that for the primary. Now, if you're starting out or restarting and you have a team, I expect more of you. What I want you to do is I want you to pick 3 primary platforms. That's what we did when we set out to build my personal brand. And let's use me as an example. We picked YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Okay. And you're going to follow a very similar flow to the solo creator. You're going to make pillar content for one of the primary platforms. That's what this is. This is the pillar content on our primary platform. Then what you're going to do is you're going to use the pillar content to inform platform native content that you create for the 2 other platforms. I kind of hinted at this for the solo creator. This could look like taking a moment that you clip and post as an Instagram reel. A moment from the YouTube long form Instagram reel. But another version of this is you find the moment and then you rewrap it contextual to the platform you're posting it on. So maybe what that looks like is you mine a moment from your long form, and instead of just clipping it and posting that to LinkedIn as a short vertical video, maybe you take that moment and you do a written post with it. You recontextualize the wrapper in order to perform best given what that platform wants natively. Not every platform prefers the same kind of content, not the same style, not the same way of communicating. There's many nuances to this. And so this is how you can behave in a dynamic where you have 3 primary platforms. One thing that I want to call out here is you need to apply the Eye of Sauron approach. I believe this is the most sustainable way to actually drive innovation on your 3 primary platforms, but not all at once. And that's the key. In Lord of the Rings, there's, the Eye of Sauron, and he's moving around and focusing on one area at a time, trying to find the ring. Well, what we are trying to do is find innovation. And so what we are going to do is we are going to focus on one of the 3 primary platforms at once. All of the focus there, everything else goes on maintenance mode. And so that's what we've been doing in the first year of building my personal brand. We have had the eye on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn have been on maintenance mode. What does that mean? That means that we're still posting on all 3, but YouTube is the only platform right now that we're putting our time, attention, and money towards innovation. The other platforms, we're making content that we know works in formats that we know work. They're not doing exceptionally well. Sometimes we have a breakout, but we're not optimizing for that. YouTube is our main focus right now. And then once we get to a point where we feel like YouTube is really dialed, we will turn the eye to Instagram or to LinkedIn, and then We'll move on to the next one. So you just get to, here's the key. Once you go through all three, don't stop there. Turn your eye back to the first one. Let's say you go YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. By the time you get to LinkedIn and get some innovation over there, you're gonna need to innovate on YouTube because your audience has probably gotten fatigued. The preferences of the audience on the platform are constantly evolving, and that's why your eye needs to constantly be shifting. Now, what platforms do you pick? Like, how do you know which ones to go with, right? Like, how did I determine YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn? Here's the first question. What medium did you pick? If you picked video, well, what platforms prefer video the most? If you picked written, for example, what platforms do really well with written? I'm gonna say if you chose written, YouTube might not be the best strategy for right now. Substack, LinkedIn, maybe Facebook. These are platforms that might better serve you and the medium that you have picked. Now, the other thing that you can ask is, where does my ideal customer spend the most time? And the natural follow-up question that immediately comes is, well, how do I figure that out? You just ask, okay? You ask around. It's not that complicated. Whenever you go to a new city and you're trying to find your favorite organic market that serves non-GMO, healthy shit, you find somebody who looks like they only eat granola bars and go on hikes all day, and you ask them. Find somebody who looks like or acts like or seems like your ideal customer and ask them where they're hanging out and go from there. It's not that complicated. If you are complicating it, I'm gonna call you out right now. You are using it as a form of procrastination, and that's some bullshit. Just pick a fucking platform and start. You can always evolve and iterate from there. You can change what platforms you do 5 months or 5 days into this thing. Don't debate, pick a platform and let's start posting. Now make sure that in this section, you didn't just listen to me share this. There's actually an exercise in the workbook that you should have downloaded. If you haven't, click the link in the description, enter your email. We're gonna email it to you, go to your email, grab the workbook and go through the exercise of determining your platforms, okay? For the solo creator, you have an exercise. For the creator with a team, you have an exercise. Fill that information in. Now, even if you are being the most disciplined Dan out there and you have done a great job of only picking, if you're a solo creator, 1 primary and 1 secondary platform, or if you have a team, 3 primary platforms that you're gonna focus on, great job, that's amazing. You can still fuck it up by having an incorrect cadence, a cadence that you cannot sustain, okay? So just because you're disciplined on the platforms that you choose doesn't mean that you have a winning formula. You need to also be disciplined on the cadence that you choose. If you choose an output that matches your favorite creator with a team of 30, you are doomed. As cliche and fucking ridiculously repetitive as this sounds, because you've heard so many people say this in so many different ways, it truly is a marathon, not a sprint. You can always increase the volume of content that you post, but what I have found is creators have a very tough time stepping back the volume. Very easy to increase, but once you set an expectation with your audience, a lot of creators struggle to walk that back. And so I encourage you, start with something that feels very realistic now and increase over time. And in the true sense of this being a marathon, not a sprint, a great example of what a sprint looks like on an extreme level is think of all those creators in the last 3 or 4 years that have had their 15 minutes of fame. They went wildly viral and then they disappeared. How much did they actually get from that sprint? Sure, there's a few individuals who were able to take it and run with it, but I would beg you to find somebody who had that 15 minutes 2 years ago and is still consistently showing up for their audience and is relevant in any sort of way. I'm sure there's examples and anomalies, but by and large, it ends up being a very short sprint that is short-lived. If you don't stick with this for a long time, no matter how big you get, if it's for a short period of time, there's not actually that much value long-term for you in it. You want to build a system that allows you to keep reaping the benefits of building a strong personal brand and putting out content that compounds in interest year after year, not some 15-minute moment in the spotlight. Now, for you who may still be on the climb of your career, and if you're watching this, you're probably that type of person, you've never reached your destination, so you're always climbing. And one thing that I will note from experience, both for myself and a lot of people that I have worked for in the past, shit is going to get bigger. If you're doing this correctly and it's working, things are only going to get crazier. Make sure to build a system that is sustainable now so that your future self thanks you. What I will tell you is when I released my first How to Build a Personal Brand course back in April 2025, to now, we're filming this December 2025, my capacity has changed significantly. I had a whole lot more time dedicated towards content at the beginning of this journey than I do right now. But lucky for us, we didn't build an output cadence that was optimized around the time that I had then. We built it in a way that was optimized around the time that I was going to have in the future. I probably had the capacity at the beginning to do a weekly YouTube video. But if we would have done that 6 months, well, actually probably like 4 months into putting content out on YouTube, we wouldn't have been able to sustain that because I got way too busy running the actual business. And the whole reason why we're building this personal brand is to support the business. And so all of a sudden, if you don't do this correctly, you get to this weird place where your personal brand and your business are like at odds and competing with each other when really they should be complementary. So if you're wondering, well, okay, this is all nice and dandy, but how much should I fucking post, Caleb? Well, here's what I would say. I'm not going to give you an exact amount because you are different from everybody else seeing this right now. Start with a cadence that feels doable. If I say, I want you to make a video twice a week on YouTube, does that sound doable? Or are you like, woof, that sounds like a push? If it sounds like a push, don't do it. What about weekly? What about bi-weekly? What about monthly? Quarterly? Yearly, right? Like you can chunk up as much as you want. Here's the key. It has far less to do with what you start out with and far more to do with the frequency at which you increase that cadence. So as long as you know that you're going to increase the volume every 2 weeks, every month, every quarter, every year, whatever, then you are set. So even if in the first year of making content, you only put out 1 YouTube video a month, you know in year 2, you could increase that volume if you wanted, and that wouldn't be a problem because we are doing a marathon, not a sprint. And I've got 2 frameworks that will really help you in accomplishing this. The first one is the accordion method, and the second one is the 70-20-10 framework. I recommend using the accordion method to figure out what the fuck your audience wants more of from you. And I recommend utilizing the 70-20-10 framework to help improve the performance and longevity of your content. The accordion method works just like an accordion. You are expanding and contracting, right? You are going to expand the accordion when you are making more content in the beginning, okay? So in the beginning, you should have your accordion fully expanded. This is your high volume content so that you can learn what your audience wants more of, AKA what they call quality. So you're using quantity to inform what your audience says is quality. And then once you have that information on what your audience says is quality, you're going to contract it and not make higher quality content per se, because I believe that quality is not something that you determine, but your audience does. But what you're going to do is you're going to put the same amount of effort you were putting into the expanded amount of volume and put that same effort into less pieces of content, increasing the odds that your audience labels it as quality. And this is a never-ending cycle because the moment that you think you know what your audience likes and you contract and you start making more of that, soon you'll get to a point where your audience is no longer resonating or responding to that content the same way they were previously, which means we will have to expand the accordion again to do more volume, to get more data and more information on what our audience is calling quality. Now, real quick, how do you determine when your audience is calling something quality? Well, if you've never posted a single thing on Instagram, let's start with your first 12 posts. If you do 12 posts over the course of, let's say, 4 weeks, that's 3 posts a week. At the end of that month, you're going to notice that some posts did better than others. And in the beginning, you don't have much you can go off of. So I know this is shocking coming from me, but you're going to look at the views, okay? Look at the views, likes, and comments. What content got more of those metrics, okay? that is probably a very good indicator that you should make more of that because your audience clearly liked that more than the other content you made. You want to continue the expansion until you feel like you have enough information and certainty that you know, okay, cool. Every time that I share, like for me, like something that Trevor and I have figured out very clearly on my Instagram is when I share the brand journey framework, it seems to work really well. It does really well on Instagram specifically. We expanded the accordion enough to get that information, and then we can contract it and make more content specifically around that through Instagram Reels, carousels, etc. The next one is the 70-20-10 framework. It is extremely simple and wildly useful. Consistent theme with me, I like things that are simple and useful. 70% of the content that you make should be shit that you know works. From the accordion method, right? You expanded the accordion, you got information on what works. 70% of what you're doing should be that shit. You should know that this is going to work. I'm not saying you know it's going to be like 10x multiplier, as in do 10x your normal performing content. I'm not saying it's going to go crazy, but it's 70% should be content that you know is going to at least perform at benchmark, if not higher. The next 20% should be iterations of that 70%. It's still the content that you know that works, but you're doing slight tweaks to either the hook, the setting, the delivery, the packaging. You're changing one little variable to try to improve the performance of what is already working to get better results. The last 10%, this is where you are most likely to fuck up. They hear me say this and they get excited about the 10%. But in reality, once you start building a brand and having content that works and you have kind of a baseline performance, you have a high likelihood of falling victim to the trap of needing to always hit your benchmark performance. And you start to get scared of trying anything new that may or may not perform as well as your standard. This is where people go wrong. You need that 10%. You need those big swings in order to figure out what the next thing is. A lot of people who make content for more than a year experience audience fatigue. And what 99.9% of creators do is they get to the point where their audience is fatigued on their current style of content, and then they go into scramble mode. They are suddenly met with the challenging, difficult process of needing to figure out what does my audience want from me now when it is needed. If you implement the 10% in the 70-20-10 framework, what you actually end up doing is you find the next version of your content before your audience tells you they want it. Thus, you never go into a point where you're panicking and trying to figure out what do we do? Suddenly our content isn't resonating. We got to figure this out ASAP. No, you're going to be the intentional, thoughtful creator who actually ends up building a system where you're always trying to put your content out of business. You're trying to find the next style, next format, next version of content that you're going to make that your audience isn't fatigued over currently. The crazy thing is eventually they will. And that's why you always want to be prioritizing that 10%. Now, it's 10%. So just to be clear, the majority of your content should not be these big swings that you have no idea whether or not they're going to work or not. You should have some predictability in your content, and then 10% of it should be big swings. Cool, so we have some clarity on how we're gonna make content and how we're gonna operate and all these things. But the big question is, how do we come up with ideas? How do you know what to make, right? I'm sure you've heard the classic guru advice, which is something to the effect of, list out your top 10 favorite creators in your niche. Then what you wanna do is identify their top 10 videos on YouTube. Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the transcripts from those videos. You're going to put them into Claude, Perplexity, ChatGPT, whatever AI tool you use, and reconfigure the script for you. It might be the little push that gets you over the barrier of entry of creating content. And if that's the case, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. But very quickly, I encourage you to change how you do this, okay? I am not the guy to teach you how to rip off other people's ideas and make them your own. That's not me. To be fair, it is a strategy that works as far as generating views and impressions. But if you're here, you want to learn how to build a brand around optimizing for trust, which means we need to start with the pain that our customers feel. And so, like I said earlier in this video, what you need to do is start with your customers in mind and the pain that they are feeling. What problems do they have that you solve? What are they afraid of? What pisses them off and makes them frustrated? What are they doing wrong? Maybe they think they're doing it right, but what are they actually doing wrong? Once you have that painful problem, like we talked about earlier, you need to take your unique solution and pair it together. I like to call this a beautiful gift that you're giving your audience. Their painful problem plus your unique solution equals gift for your audience. Now, this gift gets multiplied by your credibility, okay? Ideally, contextual credibility. What do I mean by contextual credibility? Well, for example, some videos I will give my credibility as a general credibility statement, which is something to the effect of, I've been scaling personal brands for 17 years to over 30 million followers. That is a general credibility statement. Sometimes, however, we will use a contextual credibility statement specifically for the video. So for example, if we're making a video on building a media team, I might reference as my credibility statement, building a media team from 0 to 18 full-time members while increasing content performance quarter over quarter, rather than my general 17 years to 30 million followers credibility statement. It's contextual to the topic that we're talking about, which increases the odds that your audience is going to believe what you are about to say because you have proven yourself worthy, not in the general space, but in the very specific space in which you are about to speak to. And so in your workbook, again, if you haven't downloaded it, click that fucking link in the description. What are you doing here? We want to be taking action. Click the link, enter your email, go to your email, grab the workbook, and let's work on this together. What you're going to notice is in the workbook, there's a formula that's listed out or laid out for you to be able to look at and follow. The formula goes as follows. So the problem that your customer faces plus your unique solution times the contextual credibility that you have and a proven wrapper, that is what determines the success of your content. If somebody's making a video on how to start your personal brand, and their credibility is that they've built 5 different brands to 5,000 followers each, that's great. That's impressive. That's not easy to do, right? I'm not belittling it. But you're going to take that information differently than somebody who has scaled personal brands to over 30 million followers. Or another example, someone who has built personal brands and had millions of followers, but they've only been doing it for the last 5 years versus somebody who has gotten the same amount of total followers, but they've been doing it for 17 years. And I know this is sounding like I'm trying to put myself into this like wonderful corner. Just roll with me here, hear it through a humble tone. You might hear that person differently because not only have they gotten a great result, they've done it through many different seasons and scenarios. And so you are more likely to believe that they're not sharing what worked in one scenario. They're sharing principles that you can apply into your specific scenario. The credibility that you have is a huge multiplier that determines the success of your content. Make sure that the credibility that you're providing in the piece of content is contextual to what you're speaking to. The more contextual it is, the more your audience will believe what you are about to say. Now, the exercise that I want you to do is you're going to list out 10 to 15 painful problems that your ideal customer faces. Then for each problem, you're going to attach your unique solution to it. For each problem plus solution, you need to write out what is your credibility or the contextual credibility that you are going to share. Or if this is a video that lends itself to your general credibility statement, label it as such. In your workbook, you can fill this out. You can actually identify your problems that you solve, what your unique solution is, and what the credibility statement is going to be that you're going to share in that piece of content. This becomes wildly effective. Now, the 2.0 version is maybe you actually identify these things, the painful problem and the unique solution, and maybe you write 2 or 3 different versions of what the contextual credibility is going to be. Why? Because you're not just going to make one video about this problem. You're going to make multiple videos over the next couple of years about this painful problem. And so you may want different versions of a contextual credibility statement to give for those individual videos. Now, what I want to focus on is your delivery, how you communicate these ideas that we just worked on coming up with, right? Delivery is one of the 3 levers that I talk about in helping you stand out. You have your contrarian belief, your delivery, and your wrapping paper. I believe contrarian belief is the strongest lever you can pull. But I actually believe that the second strongest one you can pull is not your wrapping paper, not the packaging, not the formats. It's actually your delivery. It's how you communicate the information and ideas that you have in a different way, potentially, than other people in your space. I think a lot of people mess up their delivery because they think they need to be like this content version of themselves. And I understand that thinking, right? Like I understand that there's a lot of people out there that talk about how you need to be really animated. You know, there's the classic old statement that I remember on old productions that I used to do, telling talent, you know, whatever you would normally do, turn up times 10 because it shows up differently on camera, whatever. Essentially, what a lot of the industry has done is created this perception that you need to create this alter ego for your content. Now, if that's your shtick and that's the brand that you're creating and you're intentionally creating this alter ego, by all means, you do you. But what I recommend is that your delivery should actually be the most authentic version of who you actually are as a human. Delivery is not about becoming someone else or building this caricature version of yourself. Delivery is actually about removing all the things that keep you and are stopping you from being fully you. Delivery isn't this performance or performative act. And this is where you can go wrong. You start trying to perform, you start acting, right? You do things that feel unnatural and not true to who you are. You start trying to match energy. This is a big one. You start trying to match energy of your favorite creator and you actually just become like an off-brand version of them. You burn out because you've built a character, not a personal brand. See, I'm not asking you to perform. I don't want you to act. I don't want you to pretend and become somebody that you are not. I want you to talk the way that you talk. If you're an extremely calm individual and that's how you communicate in real life, be calm in your content. If you're more intense in the way that you teach, be intense. If you're naturally dry and witty, I love those kinds of people, bring the dryness and the witty humor into your content. It should be a natural reflection of how you operate and communicate and deliver information in your everyday life. See, it's far less about being some charismatic character on camera, and it's far more about actually understanding the points that you're trying to communicate to your audience. The better that you understand what you're trying to say, the better the delivery becomes. It's not about being this crazy charismatic character. It's about actually understanding what the fuck are you trying to communicate so that you can communicate it in a way that they understand. Something that I've noticed that you might be struggling with is communicating your points of view. And sometimes I think this comes down to communication styles, experience, confidence, all those things. But I've also come to realize that a lot of the times, and it's kind of embarrassing for us to admit, but a lot of the times, the reason why we're having a tough time communicating something is maybe we don't fully understand the point that we're actually trying to communicate. Now, this might get a bit heady, so I don't want to get bogged down on it, but I want to give you something that can be very useful, helping you communicate your ideas when you're starting off with your personal brand and trying to get up and running. Here's how I think about it. You should be able to explain a concept to 3 different people in 3 completely different and unique scenarios. If you are able to do this, I believe you are at the point where you understand the concept enough to be able to communicate it in your content in a way that your audience is going to actually understand. And so even if you're the most dry, sarcastic, monotone individual, if you understand what you're communicating and you're communicating something useful, your audience is going to fuck with it. You will build a following. It might not be the biggest following in the world, but it's going to be a following of individuals who trust you deeply. You don't have to be the most charismatic. You just need to be the most useful. If you optimize your personal brand around usefulness rather than charisma, you will build a strong personal brand. If you optimize around charisma over usefulness, you will build a vanity-based brand. So the biggest thing that I want you to take away from this section is that you don't need to get better at your delivery. You need to remove everything that restricts you or makes you feel unlike yourself when you are making content. And one way that I've gone about doing this for myself is actually implementing game tape reviews. It's like a quarterback Monday morning reviewing the game tape footage of how they performed on Sunday. I like to look at my content and see what is it that I'm communicating that was clear and what are the areas that are not clear. Trevor and I have been talking about this a lot lately, where I go on podcasts and I'll watch how I answer a question to see how quickly am I able to communicate the important points without going down some crazy rabbit hole. I'm a verbal processor, and so sometimes I can take a little bit longer than I need to communicate a point. And so something I'm trying to implement with game tape reviews is every time that I find that I'm taking a little too long on the spot, I'll pause the video and figure out how could I answer this question more clearly and more concisely. Now that we understand how we're going to approach our delivery, trying to remove all the things that make us feel like we are not ourselves and not show up as we are, we want to move on to the third lever to pull on standing out. The first two, like I said, are contrarian belief and delivery, like we just spoke about. The next one is your wrapping paper. Okay, this is the third lever that you can pull on to stand out in your space or your niche. Something that I hear so many times is like, man, this was such a good piece of content. Why did it get no views? Nobody watched it. I think a lot of times, not always, because some of y'all are creating some bullshit, but most of you are making really good content. And it's not necessarily that the content isn't good, it's that it doesn't have a good wrapping paper or wrapper around it to make it attractive to the audience you're trying to reach. Because here's the way that this actually works. When you make content on YouTube, for example, sure, you have competitors within your niche or space, but the way that consumption works is you're not competing with just your competitors. You're competing with everybody making content on YouTube. I'm competing on your YouTube homepage with whatever other channels you're subscribed to, along with Mr. Beast and a creator you've never heard of, and 10 other creators that you love and admire and have watched a ton of videos from. Your wrapping is the only competitive advantage you have before somebody clicks. The contrarian belief and the delivery that we talk about, those are only able to be shared and communicated and engaged with after they click. Your wrapping paper is what causes them to click so they can find out what your contrarian belief is, so they can experience your delivery. So the way that you wrap your content determines how likely or unlikely someone is to actually consume it. AKA, it's really fucking important. It's so important. It's why it's one of the 3 levers that you can pull on in order to stand out. Your packaging, right? So on YouTube, this is your title and thumbnail. It's also your hook. It's also the format in which you're making the content. What do I mean by format? Well, you have like a direct-to-camera video here. We have our in the wild cinematic videos, which on our channel are, if you're struggling with making content, please watch this, or if you're struggling in your creative career, watch this video. They're 2 videos that are wildly different format, right? And so that is how you can think of your wrapping paper. It's either your packaging, your hook, or your format. It's how you're wrapping the concept or concepts that you're sharing in the content. Back to what we were talking about earlier, how you're taking the painful problem your customer faces, your unique solution, that's the gift. You need to wrap the gift in a way that your ideal viewer is going to want to rip open, aka click on. Now, the exercise that we're going to walk through in your workbook, again, if you haven't downloaded it, click the link in the description down below. You're going to build a wrapping paper library, okay? I like to think of this as, I really love Christmas time. I'm obsessed with it. I love Christmas wrapping paper. I have all different kinds. If I'm giving them multiple gifts, each of them should be a unique wrapper, okay? And so my vision for my future is one day I have a home where there's an entire room dedicated towards wrapping paper. I know that's absurd, but this is how I like to think about it. You want to create a room where you walk in and there's all these different wrapping paper options that you can choose from. You know those screenshots that you take when you're scrolling through Instagram, or you see a title thumbnail that you like on YouTube? You take the screenshot and it just goes off into nowhere in your iPhoto or your photo album and you never see it again. Well, this is something where you can actually house that inspiration and utilize it in the future. No longer are those screenshots just going to live on your phone. They're actually going to be utilized for the work you're doing. If we're thinking about just the lens of the packaging, right? The title thumbnail for a YouTube video, for example. If you're making a YouTube video, you've already filmed it, you're in the edit, and you're trying to figure out how are we gonna package it. What I have found, and what a lot of my friends in the industry have found, is when you need packaging, that is when it is hardest to find. And so what you wanna do is you wanna develop this in an evergreen sense so that when you have a video that you are wanting to package, you go into your wrapping paper library and you see what wrapping paper best fits this video or this gift that I am giving my audience. What I recommend you do is you want to have a habit, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever cadence you want a habit of searching and shopping for wrapping paper. And the two best sources that I will recommend when it comes to YouTube are oneof10.com and YouTube itself. You wanna set up a 1of10 account, and I recommend that on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis, you scroll 1of10, and literally, you're not searching for anything specific, you are generally scrolling until something catches your attention. And when it catches your attention, you need a screenshot